She never wanted trouble. All my wife wanted was one peaceful weekend at the old family lake cabin, fishing, reading, and watching the sunset from the dock. But from the moment we pulled into the driveway, the air felt off. The kind of stillness before a storm. Then we saw her Karen. Short blonde bob, arms crossed, standing like she owned the entire lakefront. And technically, she kind of did. She was head of the HOA and she loved making sure everyone knew it. We hadn't even unpacked when she stormed over, eyes darting like a hawk, demanding to know who we were. My wife calmly explained we owned the place, inherited from my uncle, and had every right to be there. But that wasn't good enough for Karen. Something in her voice shifted from nosy to hostile. She narrowed her eyes at my wife like she was looking for a reason to pick a fight. And then she found it. "This isn't your kind of neighborhood," Karen muttered, just loud enough for us to hear. Before I could ask what she meant, she was already on the phone, calling the police, saying we were trespassing, that someone suspicious had broken into the cabin. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was personal. My wife, confused but composed, stood her ground while Karen ranted about HOA rules and proper registration. The quiet lake around us felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the flashing lights. 2 cop cars rolled up, gravel crunching under their tires. Karen stood tall, pointing and puffed up, certain she'd won. But something changed the moment the officers stepped out and saw my wife. They didn't question her. They didn't even approach Karen. Instead, they saluted. No one said a word. Even Karen looked stunned. And in that moment, everything flipped. So what did they know about my wife that Karen didn't? And why did they treat her like someone to be respected, revered even? Stay with me. Because what happened in the next 5 minutes? It changed everything, and it's not the kind of story you'll forget. She never wanted trouble. All my wife wanted was one peaceful weekend at the old family lake cabin, fishing, reading, and watching the sunset from the dock. But from the moment we pulled into the driveway, the air felt off. The kind of stillness before a storm. Then we saw her Karen. Short blonde bob, arms crossed, standing like she owned the entire lakefront. And technically, she kind of did. She was head of the HOA and she loved making sure everyone knew it. We hadn't even unpacked when she stormed over, eyes darting like a hawk, demanding to know who we were. My wife calmly explained we owned the place, inherited from my uncle, and had every right to be there. But that wasn't good enough for Karen. Something in her voice shifted from nosy to hostile. She narrowed her eyes at my wife like she was looking for a reason to pick a fight. And then she found it. "This isn't your kind of neighborhood," Karen muttered, just loud enough for us to hear. Before I could ask what she meant, she was already on the phone, calling the police, saying we were trespassing, that someone suspicious had broken into the cabin. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was personal. My wife, confused but composed, stood her ground while Karen ranted about HOA rules and proper registration. The quiet lake around us felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the flashing lights. 2 cop cars rolled up, gravel crunching under their tires. Karen stood tall, pointing and puffed up, certain she'd won. But something changed the moment the officers stepped out and saw my wife. They didn't question her. They didn't even approach Karen. Instead, they saluted. No one said a word. Even Karen looked stunned. And in that moment, everything flipped. So what did they know about my wife that Karen didn't? And why did they treat her like someone to be respected, revered even? Stay with me. Because what happened in the next 5 minutes? It changed everything, and it's not the kind of story you'll forget. Karen's jaw dropped as the 2 officers straightened and gave my wife the kind of respectful salute usually reserved for decorated heroes or high-ranking officials. One of them even said, "Ma'am, we weren't told it was you." Karen's face turned a strange shade of red, somewhere between confusion and insult. You could almost see her brain trying to figure out what just happened and failing. My wife stayed calm, just nodding slightly. She never looked smug, never gloated. That was the thing about her. Even when she was clearly in control, she didn't rub it in. But that only made Karen angrier. "You know them?" Karen asked, her voice cracking a little as she looked back and forth between my wife and the officers. One of them replied, "We know of her." And that was it. No more answers. No explanation. Just a statement heavy enough to silence even Karen for a few seconds. But the silence didn't last. Karen snapped back, "Well, I don't care who she is, this is private HOA property and she's not registered as a guest or owner. This cabin hasn't been approved since my uncle died, my wife finished for her, softly. Karen blinked. Exactly. So it's not yours? My wife reached into her bag and quietly pulled out the deed. Her name was clearly printed at the bottom. Not mine. Not my uncle's. Hers. Karen's eyes skimmed the paper and then darted back to her face like she was trying to make sense of it all. This wasn't just about lakefront rules anymore. Behind Karen, a few neighbors had started gathering near the edge of their porches, whispering, watching. That's the thing about small lake communities, nothing stays private for long. And that's when another layer peeled back. One of the neighbors, a man named Bill who usually kept to himself, stepped forward. You're her, aren't you? He asked my wife quietly. You were in that article last year. The Medal of Valor. Karen's head whipped around. What article? My wife looked down hesitant. That's not why I'm here. But Bill wouldn't stop. You saved those people overseas. The convoy attack. That was you. The tension thickened. Karen looked suddenly small, boxed in by a truth she never anticipated. But she wasn't done. People like her never are. This doesn't change anything, she hissed. This community has rules. It's not about medals. It's about order. And in that moment, I saw it. This wasn't just about power, it was about control. Karen had built her identity on being the gatekeeper. But now her gate didn't hold. Inside the cabin, my wife quietly closed the door and leaned against it, her face unreadable. I could tell she was holding something back, not just frustration, but something heavier. A secret, maybe? Or guilt? Because while Karen was busy obsessing over rules, I was starting to wonder if my wife came to the cabin for peace or to finally confront something buried deep in her past. The officers hadn't come just for a noise complaint. That salute wasn't casual. And I wasn't sure I knew my wife as well as I thought I did. Karen wasn't backing down. Her voice, once shaky with confusion, had sharpened into something colder. This isn't over, she muttered, eyes narrowing like a predator that had just lost control of the hunt. She turned and stormed off, barking something into her phone, probably to the HOA board, maybe her lawyer, or maybe just to hear herself hold power. The two officers gave my wife a final nod. One of them lingered a beat longer. We'll be around if you need anything, he said quietly, his tone lined with respect and maybe concern. That stuck with me. Why would she need protection out here? As they pulled away, the neighborhood seemed to exhale. The bystanders slipped back into their homes, pretending not to be listening from behind screen doors. Inside the cabin, I found my wife sitting at the edge of the couch, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She didn't look angry. She looked haunted. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. Like what? I asked. You knew this would happen? She didn't answer. Just stood and walked over to the window, staring out at the lake like it held the answers. The sunset threw orange across her face, and for a second she looked like someone I didn't recognize. Why did the cops salute you? I finally asked. Her shoulders tensed. She let the silence drag out, and just when I thought she wasn't going to answer at all, she said, because they were told to. And because I used to be someone who gave orders that couldn't be questioned. What does that mean? I pressed. But she shook her head. Not yet. Just then, a sharp knock rattled the door. We both froze. Another knock. Louder this time. I stepped toward it, but she caught my arm. Wait. She moved slowly, reaching under the couch cushion and pulling out something small, wrapped in black cloth. A pistol. My heart thudded. Why do you have that? Because Karen isn't the only one watching, she said. I opened the door. It wasn't Karen. It was Bill, the neighbor. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before stepping inside. I didn't want to say anything earlier. Not with her listening, he said. But there's something you need to know. About the cabin. And about your uncle. My wife's eyes darkened. Not now, Bill. He shook his head. You don't understand. He didn't die of a heart attack like they said. And if Karen finds those files in the shed, he stopped himself, looking toward the window. My blood ran cold. What files? I asked. He looked at both of us. You should come see for yourselves. Now. Before someone else gets to them first. Outside, the wind picked up. The trees rustled. And just beyond the woods, a shadow moved where no one should have been. Something was coming. And whatever truth had been buried here, it was clawing its way to the surface. We followed Bill into the night, our flashlights bouncing through the woods as branches scraped against our arms. He moved fast for someone who claimed to have bad knees. My wife said nothing the whole walk, jaw clenched, eyes scanning every shadow. She was in soldier mode now, calm but ready to strike. The old storage shed sat behind a line of pine trees, almost buried in vines. I hadn't even realized it was on the property. Bill yanked open the rusted latch and slipped inside. We followed, and the musty air hit us like a wall. He pointed to a half-rotted wooden crate in the corner. That's where I saw him hide it before the ambulance came. Him? I asked. Your uncle, Bill said. But he wasn't alone that day. Karen was with him. They were arguing about something. Loud. Then 2 days later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said. But it didn't look right. Not to me. My wife knelt beside the crate and opened it. Inside, paper sealed in plastic bags, old military files, and a black leather notebook. She flipped it open. Her hands trembled. What is it? I asked. She didn't answer. Just stared at one page. Then she whispered, these are operation records. From years ago. Classified missions. Names. Codes. But this, she tapped the page, this one shouldn't exist. It was erased from the system. Bill's face went pale. Karen knew about it. That's what she was trying to get rid of. Just then, from outside the shed, a twig snapped. We froze. A red beam from a laser pointer skimmed across the shed's wall. My wife pulled me down. Move. Now. Another red dot slid across the notebook. Sniper, she muttered. We're being watched. Bill panicked. I didn't sign up for this, he hissed. He bolted through the shed door. 2 seconds later, we heard the shot. A scream. I grabbed my wife's arm. We need to get out of here, but she stood frozen, notebook clutched to her chest. It wasn't just about the cabin, she said softly. It was about what he kept hidden here. My uncle, he wasn't just a veteran. He was a handler. He ran Black Ops. And someone wants this buried badly. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. One new message. No ID. If you read that book, your past won't stay dead. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Who is it? I asked. But deep down, I could already tell. Whoever they were. They knew her real name. And she hadn't used that name in 10 years. The woods erupted into chaos. My wife grabbed my arm and yanked me down just as a second shot cracked through the trees, splintering the doorframe of the shed inches from where my head had been. We run on 3, she said, eyes locked on the trees outside. Ready? But I wasn't. Not for this. Not for the realization that my wife, calm, reserved, the woman I thought I knew, was somehow at the center of something buried so deep people were willing to kill for it. 3, she shouted, pulling me into the dark. We tore through the woods, weaving between trees, flashlight off. I could hear shouting now. Not Karen, this was male, professional, practiced. At least 2 of them coming fast. But she wasn't afraid. She was calculating. She was leading. She didn't stop until we reached the back dock of the cabin. The moon glinted off the lake's surface and a speedboat bobbed gently by the shore, an old, quiet model my uncle used to fish with. I hadn't seen it in years. They'll burn the shed, she said. Destroy the files. But the notebook, they won't know we still have it. And what's in it? I asked, breathless. She hesitated, then pulled the notebook from her coat. She flipped to the marked page. My name's in here, she said. Under a different call sign. One tied to an op I was told never happened. My uncle knew. He kept this as leverage. Karen was part of it too, funding, laundering, I'm not sure yet. But whatever they buried, this book proves it lived. The engine of the speedboat coughed to life as she turned the key. Just then, headlights appeared at the edge of the treeline. Karen's SUV. And behind it, 2 men in suits stepped out. Calm, deliberate. Not HOA. Get in, my wife said. I did. We pulled away, cutting across the dark lake like a ghost slipping between worlds. Behind us, I heard shouting, then saw flames burst in the direction of the shed. They were burning the evidence. But the notebook was safe. And then came the twist I never expected. She turned to me, eyes soft for the first time that night. We're not going to the police, she said. What? Why not? Because I'm not just in that notebook. She looked down. I helped write it. I stared at her, stunned. I buried the truth once to protect people. Now I need to unbury it to protect us. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Karen, or the cabin, or my uncle. It was about her. The woman I married. And the secret life she left behind. But now that past was awake again. And whatever came next, we'd face it together. We didn't go back to the cabin that night. Instead, we crossed the lake and docked at a closed-down ranger station she knew about, something from her past life, long before me. Inside, it was dusty but safe. No cell signals. No neighbors. Just quiet, broken only by the sound of water lapping against the shore. She sat across from me at the old wooden table, the notebook between us. For the first time, I saw her as both the woman I loved and the woman I hadn't fully understood until now. She'd been carrying more than secrets. She'd been carrying guilt, silence, and the burden of knowing too much and saying too little. I finally asked her what I think I had known deep down all along. Was it you? The convoy story, the rescue in Kabul. Was that really you? She nodded. I never wanted to be seen as a symbol. Just a soldier who did what needed to be done. But what came after, the decisions, the cover-ups, that's what kept me up at night. Your uncle, he tried to blow the whistle. They silenced him. And Karen, she was the fixer. She didn't just enforce HOA rules, she managed assets for the same people who wanted that notebook erased. She thought the cabin was just a loose thread. She had no idea the whole sweater would unravel. I looked at her, quiet for a moment. What now? We go public. Carefully. I have contacts, people I still trust. But this time I don't hide behind protocol. I tell the truth. All of it. The next few days were a blur, encrypted emails, burner phones, meetings in quiet places. And then finally a journalist with the courage to listen. She handed over the notebook and didn't ask for credit. Just accountability. The cabin burned down the next night. Karen disappeared shortly after. The official story was accidental electrical fire. No arrests. No press. Just a quiet erasure. But the real story had already begun moving quietly, online, through veteran forums, anonymous drops, whispers in government offices. People were paying attention. She went back to her name. Her real name. And I finally saw her sleep through the night. Looking back, I think the cabin was never meant to be a getaway. It was a graveyard for truth and now a place reborn by it. Sometimes the people we love are fighting battles we can't see. And sometimes standing beside them means stepping into the fire too. But truth has a strange way of surviving even when everything else burns. You don't bury the past to forget it. You bury it so you can choose when to unearth it again. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that behind every quiet life, there might be a louder history, share it. Speak it. Don't look away. Because silence is comfortable. But truth is what heals.